transformation, whether it is climate friendly.
Great, thank you. And Frederick, while you're here, we heard a lot about the possibilities for new technologies and the restrictions that were on them. Do you have any comments on that particular session?
No, I think first in general, I think it's done a fantastic job in the working groups, and I think really we have shown that we are concrete and realistic when we are making our input to the further negotiations. We had a very good discussion in the technology group. It's a complicated discussion with many aspects, but the text as it is here is, in my opinion, excellent. And as Mr. Unander said, this is an under-focused issue as climate justice in the negotiations. And there has been, we talked yesterday about the failure of parts of Copenhagen, and I think we covering that quite well, what needs to be done in the suggestions here. So I'm very happy with what's standing here. It's really an issue, as I say, that we need to focus up towards Copenhagen on, and we have been concrete and constructive. So very good results of the working group, and I'm very happy that, for example, so many of the inputs of a man like IRA Magazine is into this document. I think that has been very important.
Okay, thanks. Comments, questions, things you agreed with or didn't agree with? Come on, wake up. You obviously ate a little bit too much at lunch. Okay, well, I'll keep going then. My next question is I'd like to ask about the technology session, because I think there were lots of very interesting recommendations within it, but I wasn't clear how they related directly to the Copenhagen Agreement rather than to individual national policies. How would you characterize that?
That's a good question. So the question is, if the sector approach is so good, why does it need to be favored by Copenhagen?
Right.
And the answer is really two parts. First of all, part of what Copenhagen does is it directs its parties to the activities that are most valuable for protecting the climate. But at the same time, it will concentrate its debate on the questions of finance and the level of the caps that will be agreed by the members over the next control period. So our concern is that we are where the rubber meets the road at the sector. It's the sectors that will change, that will achieve the reductions in the greenhouse gases and the climate forcing agents. And we know from our working group and from our own experience that it is absolutely vital that sectors get together and collaborate so that the best technology can emerge. And we also know that in many cases a new technology needs the approval of standards authorities and governments across the world. So we believe it's a hands-on situation where if you go through the exercise of creating a committee of the world's best technical experts from the companies that have made the reductions at the lowest possible cost, and that you go through the process of benchmarking and reporting and sharing technology, then surely you accelerate everything.
Who makes that committee?
Well, it could be done in several ways. So it could be done nationally, it could be done regionally, it could be associations will do it. But what we're saying is that someone has to tell the world this is desirable behavior. And it may need some financing for startup. It could be the case that in every case of every sector you'd like to have government involvement for credibility, and so that the messages from the sector group can go forward to the policymakers. So if you include that as an obligation that each country will participate, including developing countries, in these committees and networks and so forth, we believe that the things that have to ultimately happen will happen quickly. We also believe that when those sector groups get together at their first meeting, they will disclose the ways that they believe they could immediately make substantial reductions. The other thing very important, and it came up in our group directly, is that there's a perception that valuable patented technology is not shared with developing countries. But the experience is that when the government of Japan or an industry association or a progressive private company understands the importance of a technology reaching developing countries, they often relax their requirements on intellectual property for the purpose of common good. And even though that sounds like a wild-eyed idea, that is the reality, is that over and over again technologies are shared on favorable conditions, and especially know-how, and in many of the cases these technologies are so valuable that once a developing country appreciated the savings that would occur, the intellectual property charges are quite affordable. So it's a remarkable process. I absolutely guarantee success if you go forward with the sectors.
Okay, so some questions here. At the back first, sorry.
Thank you very much. Paul Frisvold, Bellona, Europe. In the opening sessions yesterday, I felt that there was such a good drive in terms of talking about leadership, about global leadership, and the role of the wonderful panel we had with United States, European Union, and China. And I was wondering whether there was a possibility we could include that notion in this communique. There is a specific mentioning here of the cap-and-trade system that has not yet delivered. And I think we need to send the signal that it is these three world powers, when they subscribe to a cap-and-trade system, that it will deliver, such as the chair of the working group mentioned about scarcity. It is not the cap-and-trade in itself, but it's the lack of support for that cap-and-trade. Because cap-and-trade in the EU works actually very well. It is entered its second phase, and there is a clear mechanism to ensure its deliverables. So I would just ask the panel to comment on how we can include the role of these leaders and encourage them to step up. Thank you.
Yeah, I could have a go at that. The word cap and trade is used in many different fashions, so we have to be clear what we're talking about. The first is the concept of EU having an EU ETS. It's a cap and trade system, and it relates to the international scene through the CDM structure. The United States is about to launch a system. We hope that it passes through the House and the Senate. They are speeding it up as much as possible. It clearly has a wide coverage, has a very good system. Now, you can also look at the Kyoto system as such, as a cap-and-trade system between countries, while these other ones are cap-and-trade systems between companies. And on that scale, the question is the initial one, which I said, who is going to be behind that one? Who is the industrialized countries that is willing to subscribe to that? And also, how the United States come into that system. It's not by any means decided. And that's one of the major remaining things in the negotiations, how the United States ties into the what we call the Kyoto system. Now, you can also have cap-and-trade systems in China, and to me there is not a big difference between a well-designed cap-and-trade system and a carbon tax. There are some nuances back and forth, and where you pick up the uncertainty, whether you pick it up in price or you pick it up in quantity reductions. So what I perceive is that the world is moving forward on either or both, and there is, if the United States succeed, I think there will be a good example of to follow for others, because that system is well designed and it has some very good concepts in it. There is an international cooperation between the different cap-and-trade systems in the world, which is independent of what happens in relative to Copenhagen, and that activity